2026 is not coming to save you. It's coming to expose who you really are. The calendar just changed. But let me ask you a dangerous question. Did you change because if all you did was celebrate post-New Year, new me, and go back to the same thinking, the same habits, the same excuses? Then 2026 is not a new year. It's just 2025 with a different name. Most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they've normalized average income, average effort, average discipline, average excuses. And what's scary is this: average feels comfortable, but comfort is the enemy of growth. Average people wake up hoping, exceptional people wake up deciding, let me be clear, average is not something you fall into. Average is something you agree to. And every time you say, I'll start tomorrow, I'm not ready yet, this is just how life is, you're signing a silent contract with mediocrity. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your self-image. If you see yourself as just trying, still learning, not there yet, your results will match that identity every single time. But when your identity shifts, behavior follows automatically. Winners don't ask, how do I feel today? They ask, who am I becoming? And here's the truth. Most people avoid. You cannot live an extraordinary life with an average mindset. Motivation is unreliable. Feelings are inconsistent. Energy comes after action, not before. Average people wait to feel ready. Successful people move while uncomfortable. They move tired. They move afraid. They move uncertain, because growth does not respond to comfort. Growth responds to commitment. If you want 2026 to be different, you must stop negotiating with your excuses. Your excuses are expensive. They cost you time. They cost you income. They cost you potential. Every next level demands a new version of you, new habits, new standards, new discipline. The life you want is on the other side of waking up earlier, saying no more often, doing what's hard when no one is watching. Average avoids discomfort. Greatness embraces it, because discomfort is not punishment. Discomfort is preparation. Your future is not created by big moments. It's created by small, repeated decisions. What you read daily, what you tolerate daily, what you practice daily. 2026 won't reward your intentions. It will reward your habits. So ask yourself, what am I repeating that's keeping me average? And more importantly, what must I eliminate to elevate? Not 10 decisions, not motivation, not luck. One clear, committed decision. The decision that says, I'm done settling. I'm done playing small. I'm done living below my potential. Because when the decision is real, the behavior becomes automatic. This is not about perfection. This is about standards. And when your standards rise, your life has no choice but to follow. 2026 doesn't owe you anything. The world doesn't reward wishes. It rewards value, discipline, and courage. So don't just enter a new year, enter a new mindset. Because the moment you stop being average, life starts making room for something extraordinary. Average is a choice, not a destiny. And the moment you truly understand this, your entire perspective on life begins to shift. Most people believe they are trapped by circumstances, background, luck, or timing. But the truth is far more uncomfortable and far more empowering. Average living is rarely forced, it is accepted. It begins quietly in the mind, long before it ever shows up in results. It starts the moment someone decides to stop pushing, stop questioning, stop demanding more from themselves. Average is choosing comfort over growth, familiarity over possibility, and excuses over responsibility. No one wakes up one day and accidentally becomes average. It happens through thousands of small decisions to do what is easy instead of what is necessary. When you consistently choose convenience, you slowly trade potential for predictability. And over time, that predictability starts to feel like fate. The danger of average is that it disguises itself as normal. When everyone around you is settling, settling feels safe. When everyone complains, complaining feels justified. When mediocrity is common, excellence starts to look extreme. People then confuse their environment with their limits and assume that because something is common, it must be inevitable. But destiny is not determined by what surrounds you. It is shaped by what you tolerate. The life you live tomorrow is being negotiated by the standards you accept today. If you tolerate late starts, inconsistent effort, weak discipline, and shallow thinking, you are voting daily for an average future. And the most painful part is that average rarely hurts enough to force change. It pays the bills, keeps things stable, and allows survival. But it quietly kills growth, ambition, and fulfillment. Average thinking says this is just how life is. Exceptional thinking asks, why not more? Average waits for permission, motivation, or perfect conditions. Growth-oriented thinking moves despite fear, uncertainty, and discomfort. The difference is not talent, intelligence, or opportunity. The difference is choice. People who rise decide that their current level is unacceptable, even if it's comfortable. They decide that their future deserves more than their present habits. They understand that feelings are temporary, but decisions shape direction. Once that decision is made, behavior begins to align. They read when others scroll, practice when others relax, and persist when others quit. Not because they are special, but because they refuse to agree with average. Being average is not about income, education, or background. It is about mindset. You can earn well and still think small. You can be busy and still be average. Average is doing just enough to get by, just enough to be seen, just enough to avoid criticism. It is living below your capacity while convincing yourself that you are being realistic. But realism without vision becomes limitation. Destiny is not written by circumstances, it is written by identity. When you see yourself as someone who grows, improves, and stretches, your actions naturally rise to match that identity. When you see yourself as someone who is just trying, life responds accordingly. The moment you stop blaming destiny and start owning your choices, power returns to your hands. You realize you don't need permission to raise your standards. You don't need approval to outgrow your environment. You don't need luck to demand more from yourself. The path away from average is not complicated, but it is demanding. It requires honesty, discipline, and the courage to be uncomfortable for longer than most people are willing to tolerate. But that discomfort is not a curse. It is evidence that you are growing. Average is easy to enter and hard to escape. But once you decide that it is no longer acceptable, everything begins to change because the truth remains. Average was never your destiny. It was only ever a choice, and choices can be changed. Your results will never rise above your identity because life always works from the inside out. What you consistently produce on the outside is a reflection of who you believe you are on the inside. People often chase better results without ever addressing self-image, and that is why progress feels temporary. You can set bigger goals, work harder for a season, or get motivated for a moment, but if your identity stays the same, you will eventually return to familiar levels. Identity is the internal thermostat that regulates your life. When results rise above it, discomfort pulls you back down. When results fall below it, behavior pushes you back up. That is why lasting change does not begin with doing more, but with becoming more. Most people do not fail because they lack information or opportunity. They fail because they are loyal to an outdated version of themselves. They see themselves as someone who struggles, someone who is still learning, someone who never quite finishes, and then they are surprised when their outcomes match that self-description. Every action you take is filtered through identity. If you see yourself as inconsistent, you will act inconsistent even when you know better. If you see yourself as average, you will subconsciously avoid actions that require excellence. Identity always wins the argument against intention. You might intend to grow, but identity decides how far you allow yourself to go. The mind protects what it believes is familiar and safe. If your identity is built around limitation, success can feel threatening. Growth requires you to leave behind old labels, old excuses, and old stories you tell yourself, and that is uncomfortable because those stories have become familiar. But comfort is not truth. Just because something feels like who you are does not mean it is who you must remain. Identity is not fixed. It is formed through repeated choices, thoughts, and behaviors. What you practice long enough, you eventually become. People often ask how to raise their income, confidence, discipline, or influence, but the better question is how to raise their identity. When identity shifts, behavior follows automatically. You do not have to force consistency when you see yourself as disciplined. You do not have to chase confidence when you see yourself as capable. You do not have to beg for motivation when you see yourself as responsible for results. The strongest form of motivation is alignment between who you believe you are and how you act. When those two match, progress becomes natural. Your environment will try to define you based on your past, but your future responds to who you decide to be. If you keep identifying with who you were, you will keep producing what you already have. But the moment you choose a higher identity, your standards rise. You stop tolerating habits that contradict the person you are becoming. You stop negotiating with excuses that no longer fit. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to staying the same. Identity creates boundaries, and boundaries protect growth. Raising your identity does not mean pretending or being arrogant. It means aligning your self-image with your potential instead of your history. It means acting in advance of evidence. Before results show up, before validation arrives, before others understand, you decide who you are and live from that decision. Over time, results catch up. The world eventually agrees with the version of yourself you consistently demonstrate. Until then, discipline bridges the gap between identity and evidence. If you want higher results, stop only asking what you need to do and start asking who you need to become. Because income follows identity, discipline follows identity, confidence follows identity. And once identity shifts, results have no choice but to rise. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because you have become stronger. Your ceiling is not set by circumstance. It is set by self-image. Change the identity and the results will follow. A new year without a new mindset is just a new calendar, because time alone does not create transformation. Dates change automatically, but lives do not. The calendar flips whether you grow or stay the same, whether you evolve or repeat. Many people step into a new year full of excitement, promises, and temporary motivation, believing that the number on the calendar will somehow reset their habits, heal their discipline, and correct their thinking. But a new year has no power on its own. It does not reward hope, and it does not respond to intention. It only magnifies what you repeatedly do. If the mindset stays the same, the outcomes will stay familiar no matter how new the year looks on paper. Mindset is the lens through which you interpret opportunity, challenge, and responsibility. When that lens remains unchanged, you see the same limits, the same excuses, and the same reasons not to act. You might set new goals, write them down, and speak them out loud. But if your thinking patterns are unchanged, your behavior will eventually revert. Old beliefs pull you back into old routines. That is why so many people start strong in January and feel stuck again by March. They tried to build a new future on an old mental foundation, and foundations always determine what can stand. Without a shift in thinking, goals become wishes and plans become frustration. A new mindset requires more than optimism. It requires honesty. It means confronting the thoughts you have normalized, the habits you have justified, and the standards you have lowered. It means recognizing that growth is not blocked by lack of time, but by lack of clarity and discipline. Most people don't need more hours in the day. They need fewer distractions in the mind. When mindset changes, priorities change. When priorities change, behavior follows. You stop reacting to life and start directing it. You stop blaming circumstances and start taking ownership of choices. Ownership is uncomfortable, but it is also where power lives. Without a new mindset, a new year becomes a repetition of old cycles. The same procrastination shows up in new months. The same excuses wear new dates. The same fears resurface with different names. And over time, this repetition creates frustration, because deep down you know you were meant for more. That frustration is not a sign of failure. It is a signal that your thinking has outgrown your habits. Ignoring it leads to stagnation. Listening to it leads to transformation. A new mindset listens before life forces the lesson. Changing your mindset does not mean changing everything at once. It means raising your standards for how you think, speak, and act. It means deciding that comfort is no longer the goal, growth is. It means replacing reactive thinking with intentional thinking. Instead of asking, what's the least I can do? You begin asking, what does my future require? That single shift changes how you use time, how you respond to pressure, and how you handle setbacks. Challenges stop being excuses and start becoming feedback. A new year will not make you disciplined, focused, or consistent. Those qualities are built through repeated decisions aligned with a new way of thinking. When mindset shifts, the year becomes a tool instead of a trap. Each month becomes a checkpoint, not a disappointment. Each day becomes a vote for the person you are becoming. Time begins to work for you instead of against you. But without that shift, the calendar simply moves forward while you stay the same. If you want this year to be different, stop waiting for the year to change you. Change how you think about effort, responsibility, and growth. Because a new year without a new mindset is just a new calendar. But a new mindset can turn an ordinary year into a defining one. Discomfort is the entry fee to greatness because nothing valuable is accessed without leaving what is familiar. Growth has always demanded a price, and that price is the willingness to feel uncomfortable longer than most people are willing to tolerate. The reason greatness looks rare is not because it is reserved for a select few, but because most people refuse to pay what it costs. They want progress without pressure, success without sacrifice, and results without resistance. But comfort and greatness do not coexist. The moment you choose comfort as a priority, you unknowingly disqualify yourself from higher levels of achievement. Discomfort shows up the moment you decide to raise your standards. It appears when you wake up earlier than you want to, when you work while others rest, and when you stay consistent, even when results are invisible. It is present when you say no to distractions, no to shortcuts, and no to the version of yourself that wants immediate relief instead of long-term reward. Most people interpret discomfort as a warning sign, something to avoid, but in reality, it is a confirmation that you are stretching beyond your current limits. Every level of growth requires a new capacity, and capacity is only built under pressure. The mind is designed to protect what is familiar, not what is possible. That is why discomfort feels threatening. When you attempt something new, the mind resists, not because it is dangerous, but because it is unfamiliar. Average living feels safe because it is predictable. You know what to expect when you repeat the same habits, even if they no longer serve you. Greatness, however, lives in uncertainty. It demands action without guarantees, effort without immediate applause, and discipline without constant motivation. This is where most people turn back, not because they can't continue, but because they misinterpret discomfort as failure. Discomfort is not punishment, it is preparation. It strengthens decision-making, builds resilience, and sharpens focus. Every time you choose discipline over ease, you expand your tolerance for growth. Over time, what once felt uncomfortable becomes normal, and a new level of comfort is established. This is how people rise. They do not eliminate discomfort, they upgrade it. They move from being uncomfortable waking up early to being uncomfortable staying average. They shift from fearing effort to fearing stagnation. Their relationship with discomfort changes, and that change alters their trajectory. Greatness does not come from dramatic moments. It is forged in quiet, uncomfortable consistency. It is built when no one is watching, when progress is slow, and when quitting would be easier than continuing. Discomfort exposes priorities. When pressure rises, what you value becomes visible. Average values relief. Greatness values growth. One seeks escape, the other seeks expansion. This difference compounds over time, creating separation in results, mindset, and identity. If you avoid discomfort, life will eventually introduce in harsher forms through regret, limitation, and missed potential. Temporary discomfort chosen intentionally is far less painful than long-term discomfort forced by inaction. Discipline hurts briefly, but regret lasts quietly and consistently. Those who achieve. E-greatness understand this trade-off. They willingly accept short-term pain in exchange for long-term freedom, confidence, and fulfillment. The path forward is not about becoming fearless, it is about becoming committed. Fear does not disappear on the road to greatness, it is carried alongside action. Discomfort becomes a companion, not an enemy. When you stop running from it and start respecting it, progress accelerates. Because the truth remains simple and unavoidable. Discomfort is the entry fee to greatness, and the moment you are willing to pay it, doors begin to open that comfort could never unlock. What you repeated in 2025, you will multiply in 2026, because repetition is never neutral. Every habit you practiced, every thought you entertained, and every behavior you justified was a seed, and time is simply the soil that causes those seeds to grow. Most people think a new year creates a clean slate, but life doesn't work that way. The future is not built on wishes, it is built on patterns. Whatever you rehearsed consistently in the past year is already shaping the direction of the next one. Results don't suddenly appear. They compound quietly, and compounding never asks for permission. Repetition strengthens identity. When you do something often enough, it stops feeling like an action and starts feeling like who you are. If you repeated procrastination, inconsistency, or distraction, those behaviors didn't stay isolated in 2025. They reinforced a version of you that will show up automatically in 2026. In the same way, if you repeated discipline, learning, and intentional effort, you didn't just make progress, you built momentum. Momentum does not reset with the calendar. It either carries you forward or pulls you backward, depending on what you fed it. The danger is that repetition feels harmless in the moment. Skipping one workout, delaying one task, choosing. G-comfort. One more time rarely feels like a big decision, but repeated small choices become big outcomes. Life is rarely changed by dramatic events. It is shaped by daily patterns that seem insignificant while they are happening. This is why people are often shocked by their own results. They didn't notice the pattern forming, but the pattern noticed them. By the time the results arrive, the habits are already deeply rooted. What you repeat also determines what feels normal. The brain adapts quickly. If you repeat distraction, focus feels uncomfortable. If you repeat discipline, laziness feels foreign. Normal is not fixed. It is trained. That means you don't rise to your goals, you sink to your standards, and standards are reinforced through repetition. The life you call reality is often just familiarity repeated long enough to feel permanent. But familiarity is not destiny. It is simply practice. 2026 will not amplify your intentions. It will amplify your habits. Motivation might spike at the beginning of the year, but repetition decides what remains when motivation fades. This is why awareness matters. You cannot change what you refuse to examine. Looking honestly at what you repeated in 2025 is not about guilt. It is about clarity. Guilt keeps you stuck, but clarity gives you leverage. Once you see the pattern, you gain the power to interrupt it. Repetition works in both directions, the same force that multiplies. Weakness can multiply strength. The same compounding that reinforces limitation can accelerate growth. Small, disciplined actions, repeated daily, create results that look extraordinary from the outside. People call it luck or talent, but it is usually consistency disguised as coincidence. Success is rarely about doing more, it is about repeating better. If you want a different outcome in 2026, you don't need a dramatic reinvention. You need a deliberate adjustment in what you repeat. One habit changed and practiced consistently can alter your entire trajectory. One standard raised and enforced daily can reshape identity. Time will do the multiplying either way. The only question is what you are giving it to work with, because what you repeated in 2025 is already moving into 2026 with you. And unless you choose differently, it won't just continue, it will compound. The future is not waiting to be decided, it is already being practiced. Decisions, not motivation, separate winners from the rest, because motivation is emotional and temporary, while decisions are structural and permanent. Motivation comes and goes with mood, energy, weather, and circumstances. One day you feel unstoppable. The next day you feel tired, distracted, or uncertain. If your progress depends on how you feel, your results will always be inconsistent. Winners understand this early. They don't build their lives on feelings, they build them on decisions. A real decision removes options. It creates a line you do not cross regardless of emotion. When the decision is firm, action becomes automatic, even on days when motivation is nowhere to be found. Most people wait to feel inspired before they act. They wait for the right mood, the right timing, or the right confidence. But waiting is itself a decision, and it is usually the decision to stay the same. Motivation loves comfort. It shows up when things are exciting and disappears when things get difficult. Discipline, on the other hand, is born from decision. When you decide who you are and what you stand for, behavior follows whether you feel like it or not. You don't debate with yourself every day. You execute. That is why winners look consistent from the outside. It's not because they are always motivated, but because they are already decided. A decision shifts identity. When you decide this is who I am now, you stop negotiating with excuses that no longer match that identity. You don't ask if you should show up. You show up because that's what you do. You don't wonder if you should quit. Quitting is no longer an option on the table. Motivation asks, do I feel like it? Decisions state this is happening. That shift alone separates those who make progress from those who stay stuck in cycles of starting and stopping. Motivation is reactive. Decisions are proactive. Motivation reacts to results. When things go well, motivation rises. When progress is slow, motivation drops. Decisions don't wait for feedback. They move first and let results catch up later. This is critical because the early stages of growth are often quiet and unrewarding. There is little validation, little applause, and little evidence that what you're doing is working. Motivation struggles in that environment, but decisions thrive there. Decisions understand that consistency comes before confidence and effort comes before evidence. Winners are not people who feel different. They are people who decided differently. They decided to keep going when others stopped. They decided to do the work when no one was watching. They decided to hold standards, even when it would have been easier to lower them. Over time, those decisions compound into habits, and habits compound into identity. From the outside, it looks like success. From the inside, it feels like alignment. Life starts to feel simpler, not because it's easier, but because fewer internal debates are happening. When you rely on motivation, every day feels like a negotiation. Should I do this or not? Should I push or rest? Should I stay disciplined or make an exception? That constant mental friction drains energy and creates inconsistency. Decisions eliminate that friction. They create clarity. Clarity creates speed. And speed applied consistently creates momentum. Momentum is what most people mistake for motivation, but it is actually the result of repeated decisions honored over time. If you want to separate yourself from the rest, stop chasing motivation and start making decisions that don't require it. Decide your standards. Decide your priorities. Decide what is no longer acceptable. Then live as if those decisions are final, because in the end, winners are not more motivated than everyone else. They're simply more decided. As this year begins, understand that nothing changes simply because the calendar does. Change happens when you do. Average is not something you were born into, it is something you agree to. And the moment you withdraw that agreement, your life starts to move in a new direction. Your results will never rise above your identity. So if you want more, you must become more. A new year without a new mindset is just a repeat of old patterns, and whatever you continue to repeat will only multiply with time. Discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is proof that growth is taking place, and motivation will never be enough to carry you where decisions are required. The difference between those who break through and those who stay stuck is not talent, luck, or timing, but the willingness to decide and commit when it would be easier to quit. The choices you make consistently, especially when no one is watching, are shaping the person you are becoming. If you want 2026 to be different, you must stop hoping for change and start embodying it. Raise your standards, own your responsibility, and choose growth over comfort every single day. Because the moment you stop being average and start living with intention, life has no choice but to respond.